Well, again, good morning. It's always a joy and a pleasure to be with you and share what's on my heart. Hopefully, it'll be a blessing to you today. And if not, you can throw stuff. Just let me move out of the way. So, but anyhow, it's always good to see everybody, and I hope that again you've had a good week. So, when we think about searching, as I said in our opening, we're looking at search for tomorrow. And we can think about all kinds of different ways of where in the world is he going to go with that. And again, I did borrow that from an old soap opera from back, it was forever ago. It's been off TV for years. But some of you may remember that. I remember as a kid, my mom was a big soap opera person when I was a kid. I mean, it just was what it was. Young and the Restless and whatever, all those different things. I remember them. The Edge of Night and Guiding Light and all those different, you grow up around it, you just remember it, And I remember in the advent, in the introduction of the VCR. Okay, so now I'm dating myself, right? And we had to have that recorder set for 12:30 to hit the Young and the Restless. You couldn't miss what Victor and Nikki were doing. Here's what's funny. Okay, that was 50 years ago. All right. Not that long ago, I had to be in a place at an appointment, and they had the television on in the lobby of the place that I was at. Victor and Nikki were still on the show. I don't know what they were doing, but they were still on there. So I was like, wow, okay. So anyhow, searching, we're looking for something. The word search, when we look that word up, it means to look for thoroughly. That's a big word, to look for thoroughly, to seek out, to intentionally, diligently look for something that is not fully known or understood. Now, when we consider that, when we think about the idea of looking for something that we don't fully understand, it puts a responsibility, it puts a challenge, it puts all kinds of stuff in our way. Because I want us to understand something today. Looking for something, searching for something is not to point to a weakness, but rather what it points us to is a desire to know. I really want to know what it means. I really want to know what it says. And it could be defined in all kinds of different ways. But to search, to truly look for, may lead to some unique journeys if we're truly, earnestly looking for something. Because that's the path that oftentimes we find ourselves at in life. I believe, especially as we get a little older, as we begin to want to say, what does this mean? What does life mean? What does whatever? And all kinds of different concepts that we could go with. And when we're going down these unique journeys, these different pathways, these unknown territories, what we find is if there is a desire to know, if that is there, if there is a willingness to pursue, those things lead us somewhere. But what we oftentimes find in that, though, is a pattern forms as to whether that's something that we truly desire or we don't care. It could fall in the other category. As I've been looking through all these different things that we've talked about really since the first of the year, there's a pattern that I believe that we see throughout the life of Christ. As he encountered different people, he really met with two different groups, really. I think we could narrow it down to two different groups. He met with those who thought they knew it all. He met with those who thought they knew everything. And he met with those who are seeking. How did he respond? What was the response to both sides? Because what we find in the difference is the tone of conversation between those two groups. We see the difference in the tone. We see a difference between grace and confrontation. Okay? See, because those things stem from what is presented. Think about it. If an arrogant presenting is, I know everything. You can't tell me nothing. That's a hard place to reach. But if we find one that says, listen, I really want to know. I humbly admit I'm not sure. We talked about that a few weeks ago. I believe, but help my unbelief. That's real. And we need to be willing to touch on that. We need to be willing to dive into that, into the pool. And so the I'm not sure, the I'm open, this is someone you can work with. This is someone you can talk to. I know everything. I got all the facts. I have zero doubt. Prove me wrong. That's a hard person to reach. That's a hard hill to climb, and it's a much more difficult person to reach. And we find the difference in those two in all the people that Jesus encounters. I believe that learning in all aspects of life, regardless of what it is, I believe that it requires humility if we're going to learn. Okay, and that is, again, there is no category to where that really is short. Whether it's things in school, reading, writing, all those kind of stuff, whether it's faith matters, it doesn't matter. Everything requires some level of humility, the admission of, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I'm interested. I want to know. Because that places us in a place to receive. Okay, if I'm interested, if I want to know, it gives us the opportunity to receive. It gives us the opportunity to have something be absorbed rather than just a passing moment that has no impact. Because a lot of times we can receive information, but if it has no impact on us, it really doesn't matter. It was just a passing thing. It's kind of like a speech from somebody you really don't want to listen to, or a song that you don't care about. You just change the channel and it doesn't bother you. You know, you just go, but when there's something that I really want to know more about, we dive into that. So how did Jesus, what example do we get from the passage we're going to look at today? How did Jesus handle these two types of situations? We turn to our text and we begin with the word ask. Now, I think this is important when we begin to break this, really break this down. The word simply there is an invitation to do just that, ask. All right, so here what we find is something important. Oftentimes we almost feel hesitant to do that because either I'm embarrassed or it looks like I don't know anything, or I was told I wasn't supposed to. All those categories kind of come into play. But Jesus here says, ask. He's encouraging questions. That's a good thing. He's encouraging the search. He's encouraging the quest. It wasn't hush. That ain't what he said. He didn't say, hush, how dare you ask that? How dare you think that? How dare you doubt? You're doomed now. That's not what he said. He didn't say that at all. Because he saw the humbleness of a heart that says, I don't know. How do you know anything? You ask, right? We do that typically in life about everything. I don't know where anything's at. You know, you find a worker on the aisle. You know, typically they work in another department and they don't know, but that's a whole different story. But we still ask, right? So Jesus here says, ask. In other words, how will you know if you don't? Because assuming and guessing and speculating all ultimately birth opinions. And we all know the definition of opinions. We don't need to go any further than that. We all have one, right? And on so and on so. But opinions, they give birth to myths and legends and maybe so's, but rarely fact. Almost rarely is it a fact. And so here we find it's okay to not be sure. That's okay. It's okay to not be sure. It's okay to not fully know. So ask. Then we read, and. So we see this continues, and the and is the result of the ask. All right? So very simple as we look at that. He says, ask, and it will be given to you. Well, there's no discouragement there. None. I love that, actually, the simplicity. There's no discouragement, no warning here, no condemnation here. It's a simple reply. A simple answer, ask. Ask, and it will be given you. So, the willingness to do so, is the key that opens the door. Okay, so if I don't know, is it because I didn't ask? You know, if I didn't obtain that information, is it because I didn't ask? Oftentimes I remember big cases on the road. were oftentimes solved with an ask. How did this happen? Where were you at? And we could go on and on and on. And oftentimes it helped the situation or maybe even solved the situation. But if you didn't ask, you didn't know. That's a pretty simple concept. There's really nothing difficult about that. That's not deep theology. That's just logic. That's just life. Some become hesitant to ask. It's almost a conditioning sometimes in life. We become hesitant to ask again over the fear of embarrassment, or that's taught. You know, you don't ask. You just be quiet about that. You take what you hear or whatever, and we could go on and on. But Jesus didn't do that. What we find here is that it was the prideful and the arrogant and the self-assured. Those are the ones who had confrontations with Jesus, not the seeker. There's an important thing to pick on that, all right? Because sometimes there was an old comedian one time, he said this lady came and chastised him about something. I don't know, she was really giving him a hard time. And he told her, he says, you know, ma'am, it is very, very apparent to me that you have been educated beyond your intelligence. That's a pretty good statement, right? Sometimes knowing everything doesn't mean that you know everything. Here, Jesus said, ask. It's okay to have questions because this is why searching is so important. Anything we don't fully know, what allows us to grow? It allows there to be more room. It allows there to something to get better. It allows to find something that's true rather than speculation. Understanding of how we're called to treat each other. What does it mean to truly follow Jesus? You know, we hear the statement, follow me, but what does that mean? You know, are we talking about a literal emulation and walking behind? Are we talking about acting like? Are we talking about observing and learning? We could go all over the place with that. But here what we're finding is the understanding, a better understanding of how we treat each other, how we help each other, how we become true examples of light rather than pious and arrogant and surface level experts on stuff that was never said or that never happened or whatever, all these different things. And sadly, there's probably more of those than the other. Let's just be honest. But Jesus said, if you want to know, ask. I like that, you know, because I'm a simple person and I make that very open. Does it mean, though, when we ask, now here's where the challenge really becomes a challenge. Does it mean that when we ask, we immediately get an answer? No. And that's where we struggle. I struggle. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, that's probably one of the greater struggles is you sometimes are waiting on the answer and it seems like, okay, any time now would be good. You know, we don't always get the answer right. But that points us back to the word search. That points us back to that word, which means what? Keep looking. Maybe the ask didn't get the result that I was looking for. What's next? If one is searching, what happens? You keep looking. You keep looking, right? You think about it for a minute. You put yourself in a position in your home and you're looking for something. You know that it's there, but you can't find it. All right, what do? Well, it wasn't in this room, so I'll go look over there. Well, that thing that I remember, I wrote it down, but I can't. It's not in this book. Let me go look through another one. Well, I'm going to go look over there. I'm going to go look over here. Well, Jesus says in this next thing, he says, seek. Seek. Now, that word, again, is a part of the definition of search, but it also means to strive for. I'm seeking an answer. I'm seeking to be better. And we could go on and on. In other words, I really want to know. I really want to know, which means at this moment, I'm not sure. And that's okay. That's not a bad admission. That's not a failure in our walk or that we're some bad example of people of faith. No, it's got nothing to do with that. It means you're still you. You're still human. You're still real. And you're still growing, as we all are. Because this is a journey. How do we get there? It's like endurance being built for a competition. If you've never, ever exercised in your life, if you've never done it, and you sign up for a 5K tomorrow, guess what? It's going to be a bad day. And you're not going to make it very long. All right? That's not being mean. That's not being critical. That's just true. You know, you'll be the one over there and they'll be fanning you and trying to put some water on you. You ain't going to make it, right? Endurance takes time to build. It takes a time, you know, so if you go on the treadmill today, you're going to make it a little while. You know, maybe a minute, 2 minutes, maybe. You know, if you go on the elliptical, it's going to be a lot less than that because you're exerting yourself. It takes time to get there. Jeremiah 29:13 says this, "You will seek me and find me." All right, now, if we think about what that's saying, you will seek me and find me. That's an intentional effort. That means I'm purposely, intentionally looking. But this is what it says, okay? You will seek me and find me when. So that means there's something else has to happen. I've got to do something for the when to take place, right? You will seek me and find me when, again, the results of actually seeking, which requires looking, which requires understanding. All the answers might not be in one place. Sometimes we've got to look all over the place. You know, again, we can be critical of study habits and lesson preparations or whatever, but if any of you have ever been in my office when I'm working on stuff, I got 100 things across my desk. I know where they are, nobody else does, but I'm looking at them because I'm trying to find something to back up, not just, I don't want it to ever just be my opinion. Okay, we're going to offer those too. Don't get me wrong. We're going to offer those too. But you want it to be, so understanding the answer might not be just in one place. So he says, you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. Now think about that. You search for me with all your heart. That means I've put in every effort, every intention, every direction. And if I couldn't find it here, I went over there. And if I couldn't find it there, I went back there. Whatever. I mean, I am not going to leave any stone unturned. I'm going to keep looking. That's a diligent part of searching. That's the desire to search. The level of effort, though, is what matters. I can't find, and just fill in the blank. Doesn't matter what it is. My glasses, my shoes, my whatever. You could, you know, whatever. If you're at the mall, can't find my car. You know, you're out there, you know, with your little thing trying to see which one is. We all do that, right? I can't find my, again, fill in the blank. I hear that 100 times a week at my house, okay? Because I have 2 teenage kids that live in my house. 100 times a week. I can't find this. I can't find that. And so what is Dad's response? Did you look? Well, yeah, I mean, I went by there. But did you look behind the couch? Did you look underneath the pillow? Did you look underneath the chair? Did you look behind the door? Oh. See, friends, it's the effort that affects the results. Think about that. It's the effort that affects the results. If I don't look hard, I don't find much. You know? It's kind of like fishing, Tom. If they're not biting in this spot, where you go? Another one, right? You keep looking. You don't give up, right? And you know, that's the way that it works. Okay, so it's the effort that affects the results. Asking requires the willingness to do so. I remember working with a young person one time that was really struggling in school, and their parents wanted, you know, some kind of word of encouragement to them or whatever. I don't know that I was probably the best person to ask that, but I was trying to talk to them anyhow, the best that I could. And I said, have you asked your teacher for help? Have you let them know you're struggling? No. How are they ever going to know? Because they got 100 other kids in there they're trying to help, or at least presenting the information to. But if you don't voice that I'm having a hard time, nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to ask you. You have to ask. That's why Jesus puts the responsibility back. Ask. Ask. Well, we hesitate because we get conditioned to worry about the response. What are they going to say if they know I'm having a hard time? What are they going to say if I don't know? What are they going to say if maybe I think differently? What will I hear? You won't know until you ask. Is it always going to be what you want to hear? No. But that's life. Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is whatever. It's okay to ask. In fact, Don't just ask, Jesus is saying here. He says, seek. So don't just verbalize it. Actually, go do something. Go get busy with it. Go put effort to it. He says here, seek, and the results you will find. But what does that mean? That means the effort is the key part. If I don't look, I don't find. I think I've used it before, but it's like these two guys were arguing one day, or not arguing, but discussing their childhood growing up. And the one guy says, man, I was the master of hide and seek. Nobody could find me. And the other guy says, yeah, because nobody was looking. But we think about it's just what effort do we put in? That is where the results come. So the effort is the key. But it's not about instant results. Again, we've been conditioned for that, right? We're the microwave society. We want it right now. We don't want to wait. We just, we're hanging on to, and we want to know how to speed it up. We do. Everything now is not fast enough. You get 5G, next week you need 10G, whatever G's are. I don't even know. I just know I'm G because I'm grandpa. But that's different, right? So we think about, it's never fast enough. It's never good enough. It's never enough. And it's more and more and more. But yet still, as we advance in all of those things, sometimes we lose the most important part, because now I don't have to look anymore. I don't have to put an effort anymore. I can just mash a button and it's there for me. The problem with that is I'm not learning anything. Seeking is an intentional effort to look. Seeking is an intentional effort to want to learn. So the answer is not always instant like it is for Google or any of the other things, but rather finding the true answer, which is Him. That's what Jesus is trying to get us to understand. Just like we've talked about in the last several lessons, it's all pointing back to Him, just like when they were on the road to Emmaus, all the other stuff, is trying to get people to understand the answer is right here. It's right in front of you, but you can't see it because of everything else. So the seeking, the asking is all about intentional pointing. So what does that look like? What does that mean? We see the encouragement here. We see to look and to keep looking. We see all of those things. We see, well, wait a minute. I mean, you're talking about doing all this stuff and making all this stuff, but I mean, so-and-so said it. So, I mean, certainly so-and-so can't be wrong. So I'll just stop right there. I'm not going to look anymore. Is that always a good thing? No, it's not. Is that always the right way to end the journey? No. Because so-and-so could have been wrong. That's not being critical of saying that somebody else has got a different opinion than me, so clearly they're wrong. Because I got to be right. I'm the smartest guy I know. That's the way we, it's not about being critical. It's not about finding fault. It's not about finding differentials in someone else's answer, style, teaching, whatever the case. But sometimes what happens is someone gets stuck into a place and they can't see beyond that. So therefore the answer that they offer is limited. Maybe they've put a hedge around it. Maybe they don't see beyond that. So therefore they can't answer anything, because much like those who confronted Jesus, well, I already know everything. You can't tell me nothing. So clearly you're not right because I have to be. All right, so it's not about a confrontation about who's right and who's wrong. It's about listening to you, listening to the pursuit that we're each called to do. Ask and seek. Those are continual actions. Those are never ending, because once I learn this, I want to know more. It's like mastering an instrument. You never master it. You're always learning a new chord or a new this or a new that, a new octave. There's always some kind of way to do something better. My dad was a builder forever, but there was always, every year, this works better. We did it this way back 20 years ago, but look at this way now. We can cut this angle and it works better, or whatever. There's all kinds of ways. And faith is no different. Again, it's not about settling on one thing. We have the essentials that we've settled on, but it's about how do we get there that we can have that foundational statement. And so looking and seeking and answering is so important. And that's why this simple little verse that we've heard millions of times, thousands of times, how many ever times we've been exposed to it, asking it to be given, seeking you'll find. We've heard that. Okay, over and over. But look at the depth of what is actually there, because it is a challenge to all of us. Why does it matter that so-and-so had a good answer, but so-and-so didn't. And again, we can plug in all kinds of names. I don't give credence to a whole lot of stuff. But I heard something this past week, and I'm going to share this with you, right? Because here's an example. Now, again, it seems controversial on one side because of the subject matter. On the other side, this is why it's important that Jesus is speaking to the individual heart. You ask, you seek. Don't settle for certain things. Pastor standing in front of his congregation last Sunday, true story, all right? Filled house, packed to the rims, right? And he says this as he stepped down on the stage. He says, I'm going to say something that's going to upset some people in this room. Okay, now some people, okay, well, preachers do that. They step on your toes, whatever. He said, I'm going to say something that's going to affect some of you in this room because you've been to my office for counseling because of this problem. And I need to tell you, but I'm going to tell you openly in front of everybody. He said, if you have a child, son or daughter, doesn't matter, and they come to you today, tomorrow, next week, or they've already been to you or whatever the case, and they tell you that they are gay or that they're struggling with that uncertainty about that part of their life. He said, you have a decision to make. You have to decide if you're going to love that child or love God, because you cannot do both. Jesus never said that. Let me tell you something, friends. In this case, so-and-so was wrong. Okay, very much so. Condoning and agreeing and endorsing and loving are not the same thing. We need to understand that. Okay, we need to understand there's a lot of people in this world that are wrestling through a lot of stuff that we don't understand. And I would be the last person to ever say, oh, it's just whatever, do whatever you want. I would never say that, because that doesn't always lead us to good places. Jesus was a seeker. We need to understand that. He doesn't ask us to do anything that he hasn't done. Father, where are you? He was a seeker. He said, I came to seek and to save the lost. Think about what he says in that. Think about the importance of that statement. He said, I came, because they were asking him, why are you here? Luke records, I came to seek and to save those who are lost. Let's think about that for a minute. I came, that means on purpose. You know, if I come anywhere, I went there intentional. I meant to be there. I went there. I had control of that vehicle or whatever. I came on purpose to seek. That is intentionally look for. Think about this. He said, I came to seek, and so not just to find. I didn't come just to find. He said, and to save. The word save means rescue from harm. The word save means rescue from danger, which also includes lies and yourself. Because sometimes we're our worst enemy. That's just true, right? And he says, I came to seek and to save the lost. The lost. They're not sure where they are, and they're not sure where they're going. Okay? That's what lost is. Lost again is aimless. I don't know. I don't have a direction. I'm not sure where I'm going. There are times in life to where I feel lost. We're not talking about eternity. We're not talking about salvation. We're talking about, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know how to get there. That's a real thing. He's saying that's who I came to give direction to. That's who I came to save. And we immediately imply and impart all the eternal and salvation. But think about, if I save you from a burning fire, just rescued you from danger. If I saved you from drowning, which I'd be the worst person to do, but I kept you another life, another day in this life. Jesus said, I come to save you. I come to give you direction. He asked, he sought after. And here, again, in this very, very familiar text, oftentimes not used as it's written. And again, that's not being critical, but this is something so much deeper than just the surface that we sometimes apply to. He's telling everyone, it's okay to do the same thing. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not know. It's okay to keep looking. It's not forbidden. It's not that you're wrong. It's not anything. Just keep doing it and you'll find the answers. It's not a lack of faith. I would even go further and say it's probably the greatest evidence of faith that we're willing to keep looking. The strongest evidence of our faith is oftentimes the refusal to stop searching. Think about that. If I really want to know, I got to keep looking. if I really want to understand, I got to keep looking. I can't just say, oh, well, there it is. But is that always true? You know, in a criminal case, the evidence may be there, but you better read it. You better look deeper. You better find out, because sometimes, especially today, it might not be real. Somebody might have created it, you know, and placed it there, whatever, all these different things. Look deeper, because knowledge is not the same thing as searching. Knowledge is not the same thing as searching. We ask, then we seek, and then he concludes this call to action with knock. Now think about this. That is a physical action. Ask is verbal. Ask is verbal. Seeking is the willingness to look, but knocking is putting it all in place. You know, knocking is the actual hands on. Well, I wonder if Jeff is home today. He probably will be, you know, on the chair watching the Yankees lose. No, I'm just but I wonder if anybody, go knock on the door and let's see. Go ring the bell and let's see. In other words, do something. If you want to know, you go find out. Isn't that still true today? Isn't that applicable in every one of our lives today? And Jesus says, and I'm telling you, it's okay. It's okay to do that. It's okay to ask. It's okay to seek. It's okay to knock. Knock and so this is the results of the willing to do so, and the door will be open. In other words, you'll see what's there for yourself. No, it won't be speculation, and it won't be third party. It won't be, you'll see. If you knock, you'll see what's there, whatever it may be. Because friends, here's the thing. There are parts of life, and again, the older we get, the more this becomes reality. There are parts of life that make no sense. That's just true. There are parts of life that make absolutely no sense. It's a giant distraction at times because we get sidelined by why and how and all these different components that just tends to draw us away from the things that matter. Okay, we can get really, really, really hooked onto that. Our faith matters. Our faith life matters. How do we live that out? It's not just what we believe, but why we believe it. That's where the searching comes in. That's where the asking comes in. That's where the knocking comes in. All of these different. Jesus says, ask the question. He says, seek after the truth. He says, knock on the door and see for yourself. Verse 8 continues this, and it says, everyone who does all these things. In other words, all that are willing. Everybody that is willing. I grew up, and again, I never say things to be critical or throw anybody under the bus, but it's just sometimes your life is your best illustration, right? And so I remember growing up in church, and it was an every week thing. You always went. If the door was open, you were there. And I grew up, and I was taught very, very clearly, you did not ask questions. If the preacher said it, or if it was in the Bible, that was it. It was settled. You couldn't ask questions. You couldn't look further. That was it. Those things were off limits because that was a sign of doubting. That was a sign of some type of moral failure. But if we consider the words of this verse, and not just these words, but these words that we are told are the very words of Jesus himself. If we accept that, if we believe that, we see the opposite of faith is not asking the question. The opposite of faith is not asking the question, but rather the opposite of faith is coming to the conclusion there's nothing else to learn. Think about that. There's always more to learn. There's always ways to get deeper. There's always to understand more. What is this thing? So he says here in verse 8, everyone who asks, seeks, and knocks will get an answer. You'll find the answer, and you'll know it for yourself. But the key to all of it is, was, and always will be the desire and willingness to do it. Because if I don't have that, I'm not going to look. If I don't have that, I'm not going to try to find it. Jesus here gives us very, very clearly, he gives us permission. And so the question is now, that's not the issue anymore. Can I do it? Should I do it? We got permission right here in that one verse that we've heard over and over and over. He's saying, it's okay. Ask the question. Look for the answer. Knock on the door. Go ask. Go seek. And when the door is present, when it's in front of you, knock on it. The answer It might not be what you've been told. But the answer will lead you to what you need. The answer will lead you to where you are ultimately looking for. And it will give you the moment and give you the opportunity to learn and seek more. Because every open door is an opportunity. Every closed door is an opportunity to go to one that is open. All right? Those are important that we understand the logic of that. So the search for tomorrow. It's not about fortune telling. It's not about end times prophecy. It's about pursuing the more that we all wonder about. What is more? What is left? What is all these different things? And here's the thing. It exists. More exists. The question is, are we willing to look? Amen? Father, we thank you for the opportunity to consider the words we've been given, to consider the clarity of things, the understanding of the simplicity of things that sometimes we overlook because we overanalyze or over-scripturalize or over-theologically lies. I know it's probably not even a real word, but whatever we got, we add all this stuff to the simple and we miss the message. Today, Father, I pray that it's clear that it's okay. We can ask the questions. We can look for the answer. We can knock on doors for opportunity and find out what's really there. And then that will advance us in our faith much, much greater than arguments over who's right. And we just thank you for the opportunity that we have had today to be together, and we just pray now, Lord, for as this time comes to a conclusion and whatever the rest of our day may hold, that we would just think about these things, and as we pursue matters of faith, that we look deeper, and we wouldn't be concerned or cautious or scared of doing that or feel guilty, because you have said, ask, seek, and knock. And we just pray to hold on to that today. So as we enter into this last time of worship, Lord, we just pray that you minister to our hearts as only you can. We ask it in Christ's name. Amen.